here today. I've talked to a lot about what's going on around us and even maybe some global stuff. But I just want to say hello.
7-8 seconds into it, it's already good.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's always good. I love. I don't actually get a chance to go to churches a lot to talk about this activism, so I enjoy the fact that you're willing to have me here and talk about it.
Well, I think it's really high time that we have this kind of discourse within the churches. A lot of things of our founding fathers came out of biblical-minded people. A lot of the things that we know as our truth, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, all that kind of stuff came from basically biblical understandings of how life is supposed to transpire. So let me introduce just a few things about Glen here. We're going to talk about some of the things that he's done. It's kind of amazing. There he was, a country boy.
Yeah, definitely.
And he was saying, "Thank God I'm a country boy." He was a long distance runner, and just by chance,
They heard all of that.
Story. I'm not going to tell it.
All that.
One of the
Heard
things
everything that's been going on.
I grew up here, fifth generation Washingtonian, lived here pretty well.
How do you
And
listen?
I was a good runner in high school, and I ended up qualifying for the district track.
And it's been
And
recorded, but it has
back
been.
then, it was the largest school up in Thomas Jefferson.
It had Go
So
Live, and I was
the
talking about
largest,
it. It had,
in order to get out to go to state, had to be top 6 in a mile and 2
it's
miles.
been
So I
recorded.
was running a mile and 2 miles. And I missed it in the mile by 1 point.
And I don't really know why.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to try for the 2 mile. And I get the 2 mile, and it looks good. At the last minute, somebody passes me to get one. And I get 7. And I think, well, that's it. I'm not going to state. And it turned out I got disqualified from a runner from Cambridge High School places. And he got disqualified. It never happened. And I ended up going to state. And I ran very well in the state 2 mile. And that was really what
I guess that's where mute buttons might come in handy.
And the internet didn't exist yet, so they reached out to me and they said, the guy called me. I thought he was calling from Columbia Community College in Eastern Washington. I had never heard of Columbia. I didn't even know where it was. I mentioned New York City, and because of that, I applied, and they don't give athletic scholarships, but they, you can academically get in, and I could. And that's how I ended up on the East Coast, going to live in New York City, free Giuliani, and that's that really started my activism, going to school in that direction.
Yeah, and Mike, I asked you before about what does activism mean. Tell us a little bit about what activism meant when you were in college at Columbia University,
Right.
And you were what and they were what? What was happening?
Well, a lot of it was activism, at least the way I would define it, is just standing up for what you believe is telling the truth. So speaking the truth a lot of times, and that requires you to be civically engaged in some way or another. You have to be willing to debate or discuss or host speakers, do other events that get your ideas and your messages out to people. And when I was in college, that I actually had originally tried to start a libertarian club on campus, and there was no way that the bureaucracy was crazy. So I thought, well, I'll do what a good activist would do. I'll take over the places here at the time called which was this little group that nobody had heard of really on campus, and the girl that was in it handed me the key, literally in a dark alley, handed it to me and ran away. I never saw her again. And the key was still
Sounds like
mailbox.
something in a movie.
Yeah. Wasn't hard to take it over. They hardly anybody left. And that was a vehicle I needed to use to be able to debate and reserve rooms, bring in speakers, and confront the left. It was really a Columbia socialists, open socialists. They said they were socialists, and they hated everything that I would
Wait, what
believe
the heck?
freedom, liberty. They hated Christianity. They didn't like that, of course, it's the nature of socialism. So they it really started to grow. Dialogue, but sometimes sometimes aggressive dialogue, sometimes confrontational a little bit. They would have a hunger strike and I would barbecue right next to it. Those types of things. And I brought in the National Student to speak on campus when I was before he was really well known. I brought Rudy Giuliani on campus when he was running for mayor. He got elected the year after I left. But so there was a lot of that. So that I view that as classic activism, student driven kind of activism where you're doing the classic things that
I don't have
So were you able to
or YouTube.
like cheer
To
some
listen to
people
YouTube.
bring people in?
I don't know how to twist it.
quite often.
Is that right?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, our group was small when we started, but there were hundreds of small students when I left. The funny thing is, the one thing I use the example, but what grew our movement the most was a willingness to stand up and find get an option, sometimes threatening, leftist sort of environments, right? It's really hostile, green, kind of overreaching, abusive. It seems to be the where they must force everyone to submit, right, to their running point. And so when somebody's willing to stand up to that and not be intimidated or back down from it, and you can do it in an effective and capable way, then people want to be, they want to be involved. They want to be people who are willing to do that. And especially if you're able to do it with humor, the hunger strike next to the market, next to the, when they had that, what it really was these leftists were doing hunger strike outside of the dining campus, and they were trying to berate, virtue signal, right? Berate everybody coming out of the dining hall, right? Tell them what are, you're not as good as I am. So we did an arbitrator next to it, and hundreds of students saw it. And it was really confrontational nearby, right? But our group tripled in size because students felt like that's the kind of group I want to be involved in. It's fun. It's funny. It's you're a little rebellious in a good way, and yet you're doing things, debating issues. You're approaching things logically with some level of logic, right? And doing it in a funny and interesting way that I think it helped make a difference on the campus, and I've seen it with other campuses. That's a lot of things I learned back then I still use today as out in the real world, right? Where you're actually out
It's not live.
bigger dollar signs,
I don't. It's not.
take away our freedom
It's just until she can hear.
schools or whatever it is they're dealing with. A lot of the skills that we get about hard of darkness, for sure.
You're part of darkness.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how they get so many principles that are biblical, just completely opposite. The Bible says be humble while you're fasting and praying for good things.
Right.
Don't just wash your face, don't act like anything, don't try to think to yourself. That's what the biblical worldview. They were so far on the other side of that even the person that wasn't even a Christian or just a normal thinking person would say, that's not okay. But that makes me feel like, give me hope. Because we can do things like that. Why aren't my question is, why aren't the churches doing things like that? Going out, serving, and doing things in our public and having an honest conversation about issues that are right in front of them every day.
Well, a lot of it is, when I do activism, of course, I work in the community. And
Right.
so I don't, I work with people of all faiths and all backgrounds,
Right.
and for common cause issues, usually liberty, freedom oriented, right? Abuse, when the state was being used to abuse our property rights or take away other freedoms, censor free speech, or conceal corruption and incompetence of government, whatever it is. So I find you have to have a big tent, true big tent, if you bring it right, live like that, with a common goal that we want to clean things up or we want things to be better in our community. And I think that level of civic engagement should stop just because you have crossings, right? Suddenly, and now I've insulated myself in this silo of like-minded folk going to church, and now I'm afraid to even say anything when I leave the church grounds, which is unfortunately a common theme we find. And I think that civic engagement, right, shouldn't matter which church you go to, whether you go to church at all. But certainly those who care about their community, and I find those people who go to church sort of would say, yeah, I care about what's going on in the community. And of all people, those ones should be the most involved. And yet I find oftentimes it's exactly the opposite.
And that's why I wanted you to come in. So we can start the conversation. We have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Last night we had the Republican committee meeting, and we're going to figure out where we're going to do it all month.
Right.
So I was incensed when I went home. There was only 40 people here.
Right.
They were all arguing with each other,
Right.
causing a whole bunch of trouble with each other.
Right.
Nothing was getting done. So I went home and I looked up how many churches are there in Bergen County. Well, I didn't get the whole search done, but there is 70 churches in Olympia. So 7 times 3, 21, you can have, that's over 200 churches.
Right.
In each church. And we know churches right around us, like in England, that have a couple thousand people.
Right.
If each church, 200 churches, had one person, just one person come in and say the views of that church, it would just change the whole world.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't even necessarily have to represent the views of the church per se, but they just need to come in and represent the views of, most of this is common sense, or, issues that you just want to be involved in. And
yeah, I'm not saying represent the church's views necessarily.
Right.
Just on civic discourse.
Right.
I mean, just be here, be a part of the process.
Right.
That's it.
And it shouldn't be too much of a stretch to recognize that if your community is having situations like what we see in that park here, right, Olympia or Tuckwater, Lacey in particular, where they have these homeless camps have really put a lot of people who are drug addicts and down on their, probably the lowest point in their life. And
Right.
what we find is the state comes in and subsidizes, endorses, promotes, and continues that lifestyle for them. And then of course that integrates the community at large, encourages more people to become drug addicts and that. It ends up becoming, it is appropriate to stand up and say that is wrong and engage and be involved in it, right? Or that there's got to be a path where we can help people get off drugs, not just continue to feed their addiction until they're dead, or until they've turned to a life of crime, and so, and create a lot more victims. These are certainly appropriate things for people to engage and be involved in. When they don't have the political label on them, right, throughout and Democrat, these are just simply straight up policy issues that affect the community. And they're all around us. How your tax dollars are spent, that everybody's paying, how your school is, the public school, is teaching kids, even if you've taken your kids out and they're in Christian school, they're in homeschool maybe, even then, somebody is educating these kids that are going to be living in your community, your neighbors, working with your kids when they grow up. And why would we want them to be illiterate or not believe math is real or believe there's actually two their pronouns that can apply to a wide variety of magical modifications of who you think you are? These are things that is perfectly appropriate for us. And in fact, I think it's critical to get involved and be involved and make a difference. And instead, the trend has been, you've witnessed probably a few times that we discuss this, the trend is more, I'm going to insulate and isolate myself out of the world. Right? Maybe I'm in a church or I'm just with my Bible study or my group where I only surround myself with people who agree with me. I'm only talking to them. Well, that means that you're ineffective and you insulate yourself from having any impact on the community. And in fact, you've removed any good impact you could have because you decided that I'm going to isolate myself over here, which talk about how you yourself under bushel. It's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't find anything biblical in that approach.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree. And they're echo chambers.
Right.
From many different groups of folks. And I find that when the church becomes just a little echo chamber, we're all praying for ourselves, talking to ourselves about our own favorite persons, all that kind of thing, it becomes unhealthy over time. Because, and plus, in those situations, everyone wants to be happy in the situation, so nobody wants to bring up anything and be controversial.
Sure.
So then, because they don't want to disrupt, the only thing that they know that is stable and happy and wonderful,
right,
whatever level you can achieve of that. Obviously, churches have a problem too, but when you're staying in your little circle, then you can't see outside of it.
Right.
And you can't take those things out. And I just keep thinking about the Great Commission. Why do we think in the church the Great Commission stops here in the church?
Right.
It should start when we leave and start here at the local city council, at our school boards,
right,
where we can have an effect and have an honest discourse with those that are in charge and those that are involved.
Right, and it's a lot of it may feel mundane, or may feel overwhelming, or may feel strange because you have to pay attention. And so, and it's not as comfortable, right? It's very easy, and it's human nature, just to surround yourself with people who agree with you. That's easy, right? Then life isn't as challenging, and most people don't like conflict of any kind, and so they avoid conflict. And in fact, I think a lot of the bad things that happen in our society are a direct result of a combination of fear and knowing that human nature element where people want to avoid conflict. And actually, even more cultural, we live in the Pacific Northwest, it's even more of a cultural phenomenon out here where the Pacific Northwest is even less likely the average person to be willing to stand up in front of somebody.
Why do you think that is?
I've heard it attributed to the Nordic heritage, right? We have so many people from Norway and Sweden and Finland, that kind of part of Europe, where it is very cultural to have a kind of more harmonic sort of approach to how you approach communities. Whereas you won't see that if you were in New York City, right? If so many things going on, right? So I think that our desire to be on good terms with everybody around us, which is very normal human nature and we aspire to, that's manipulated and used as a way to abuse us in our community by those who are willing to have that confrontation and intimidate us in silence. As most churches, I think, are. Most churches are, and most Christians are probably very intimidated and manipulated to be in silence and be irrelevant to the community, which is exactly where people who are abusing the community in government or these other forces, that's where they want
gets, using one of my grandmother's statements, that gets my dander up. I don't know what to say here. That fires me up because this should be the most relevant. And Jordan Peterson recently said that the church should be the most dangerous place in your culture, right? Because it was when it started.
Right.
Giving your heart to Jesus was a death sentence. You lost your job, you lost everything. Even in a Muslim country today,
Right.
You give your heart to Jesus, and it could be a death sentence, your family, the whole thing.
Or
It's right now.
Right. Yeah, any other country, and yet in America, it just means that once you've done that, now you've removed, at least the tendency has been to remove yourself now completely from all activity, that has any influence in your community, which is, I think, is not biblical in a sense at all. And I don't, I think civic engagement, I don't usually, when I'm out involved engaged, oftentimes I'm talking about the little biblical context, right? I'm talking about policy, I'm talking about what's right and moral and good in the community, what's honest, what's transparent, things like that. But there's an obvious overlap with, because those concepts, a lot of those have come out of historic, we really stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Before us, previous generations that have gotten us to this point where you live in what is still relatively a high-trust society. That comes out through this Judeo-Christian sort of approach to, equality of the law. Treat others as you want to be treated.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Absolutely. All these kind of basic concepts that whether our modern people in power want to accept or not, still serve as a foundation for much of what we at least theoretically have as government today. So why would you not want to be engaged and involved in that? Making sure you don't lose what you have, making sure that when somebody's gone off the rails with the policy that's wrong, or you can see your neighbor being harmed, what's happening, why would you not be engaged and help and stop other people from being harmed? That seems to me a very important part of who we would be as civically engaged people.
Yeah. Well, and what's happening that I know of firsthand, we have neighbors around us that because of ideologies don't like each other, who've never talked to each other in their lives.
Right.
They just have this whole thing where you're this or you're that, this sort of a construct that becomes like a mind warp, that they think something and are afraid of something that they've been taught is not true at all.
Right.
And what in our case, the folks that are well, I can say it like this. In the small town that I grew up in, Northern California, all the ranches around the place, there were good people who owned ranches and bad.
Sure.
There were. However, if a guy's farm burned down, if he was the best farmer and a gazillionaire, everyone will help build the farm.
Right.
Even the guy that was drunk that was bad.
Right.
They'd always be there. All of us would be there for everyone.
Sure.
And I think that it's really sad to me to see people putting plaques up in their front yard that say this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just not going to like you because of an ideology.
Sure.
The thing is that all of our houses burn down. All of our lives come unglued. We get divorced. We need each other for those times. We need to repel from each other because of an ideology.
Right.
We should be moving towards each other, towards the hurting. That's what Jesus said. He moved towards the hurting, not away.
Right. I mean, we'll say we want to encourage good Samaritans.
Right.
When you see somebody in trouble, you want to go and help them. And yet the tendency, I think, now, as almost part of government policy a lot of times, is to discourage people from helping each other. Or the cancel culture idea that you see right now, where it's used that if you dare stand up and say, I think there's something wrong here, you get attacked, right? And so, and fear and apathy of two things, kind of twin enemies of freedom and liberty. And, Christianity, or what it may be, it thrives in an environment very quickly. And it does. And I think that has to be some recognition that it does.
Yeah.
And so when you allow an ideology, left-leaning ideology, whatever label you want to call it, progressivism, leftism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, when you allow that to start to dominate, take over your society, it isn't going to be a good thing. It's going to be bad. And they have to silence their opposition. And it's much easier to get their opposition to silence themselves. Right. And most Christians have allowed themselves to be silenced through just intimidation.
And on that, there's two things I want to get into this part of it. And number one is the 501c3.
Right.
In terms of that 501c3, I don't want to go over how Johnson did it and all that kind of stuff. But it's almost like it's become a barrier where pastors are hiding behind it and thinking, well, I better not do it or I'll get my tax deferred status removed. Well,
Right.
It's never gone to court because it's speech and it would never win.
Right.
It's literally unenforceable.
Right.
You tell a pastor that you can't say this or that. So we really need to take that away. And the other thing is that's really important, that really frees us up. About 50 years ago, the same Supreme Court that brought in Roe v. Wade also brought in the Lemon Act. Is that what it is, the act, or is it a?
I think it was the Lemon Act.
Yeah, the Lemon Act.
It makes you think of a bad car, right? But
yeah, they banned all bad cars.
Right.
So what the Lemon Act did was it was basically that separation of church and state. So basically it said lawfully, if you walk by a courthouse and they have a nativity scene and it hurts your feelings, you can literally sue. Or if you see the Ten Commandments and you're an atheist, you can sue them. So that was that law. So recently, within the last year, let me see, it was Kelly Shackelford from the First Liberty Institute, largest legal institute in America. Just an amazing group of people. They just won the Coach Kennedy case.
It did. That was an 8-year lawsuit.
8 years,
Yeah.
millions of dollars.
Right.
But what it did was it deconstructed and tore down the Lemon case.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
let the Lemon Act.
Yeah.
So and what happened? The separation of church and state. Let me just explain that. You and our folks here real quick. What happened in our Constitution? Lots of us know this, but it was an establishment clause. What they didn't want was they didn't want one church or the other as the established religion in the country. Right? We had freedom of religion, but it did not take the principles and the philosophy away. It just took away the establishment of. Right? So, and that has caused a huge amount of misunderstanding. Like, we're not supposed to go out there. We're not supposed to go to the city council. We're not supposed to be involved in politics. Well, it's been a hoax, but it's right. And it's caused a terrible bunch of a mess because, and I hate to be trite like this, but I am kind of humorous, I think. It's almost like, believe it or not, if we were completely removed from the whole thing, they wouldn't be able to tell a man from a woman. Right? So if I was to say that 20 years ago, they'd have thought I was crazy.
Yeah, no, but it happens every day. I mean,
Well, we had a Supreme Court justice. They said, can you tell the difference? Can you tell us a definition of a man and woman?
Right.
Remember that?
Oh, a woman, yeah. No,
So she couldn't do it.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
wouldn't do it.
Well, our current was Officer General of Instruction, Chris Rydell, right? So counted and said, can a man give birth to a baby? And he wouldn't answer that question. You know? And when you talk about religion, right, this is the one thing I think that we sometimes make a mistake when we think about, and I'll say it's our opposition, right? I view myself as an evangelist for freedom of religion, and as an activist, I think that's what I'm doing after a lot. And what happens is this using this and saying, don't, your religion, right, leave me alone, I don't want to hear my religion. It's the exact same people do that, have their own religion. And they push it more aggressively, more evenly, more, and it's this whole left-leaning sort of set of beliefs that they have. And they have the ability to buy indulgences, right? They have the ability
It's
to.
Yeah,
it is, and it's this whole architecture built around what you have to show and how you have to demonstrate your good works. And like I said, the indulgence idea, where you can basically be a bad person as long as you do these things, and where you can be excommunicated, from the group if you no longer believe all the orthodoxy. Yeah, and that's about orthodoxy, right? Yeah. That, by the way, changes all the time. And so, and I think they are every bit as religious, probably way more, and more dogmatic about it, for sure, than anything that I've ever seen in any kind of Christianity, in any organization in modern America today. Yeah. And so it's always funny to me when I hear them say, don't bring your religion in. They brought their religion into every aspect. Our schools, our laws, our code enforcement here. I mean, the tax policy, what type of vehicles you drive, what you can wear, what you can say, what your houses look like. All that is driven by the religion that they place in laws. Yeah. And so they use this threat of this religious ideology, this threat of, hey, we want separation of church and state, right? Well, their church owns the state right now. And so that's the establishment clause violated by that. We have to step back and recognize that we should not be intimidated from engaging with being involved, because otherwise you completely surrender, and a lot of other people are going to be harmed, not just you, not
course of discourse, I think one tool that if we could learn would be good is simply ask questions, right? We don't have to know everything. They'll bring up their issues. Just ask the next question. How does that work with children? How does that work with whatever? Then you don't use statements, you don't use judgments, and then the discourse continues. So I think that I'm believing that more people are going to be involved. I think there's a lot of people that are waking up.
Right.
What's going on? Because about 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever, the COVID thing was happening, we got in this group. We go, we got to figure this out. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we didn't come up with specific things, but we've been marching towards it, just getting the word out about what's happening around us. Because there's a huge group of people, I think about 20 million people in America, that are just turning their heads right now and saying, they're not on the right, they're not on the left, they're just good people in the middle, just want to live a life.
Right.
Have their children, raise their kids, maybe go to college, whatever. They just want a normal life. They're looking around going, what the heck?
Right.
And so I think a lot of those people are within this period of time. I mean, I'm not going to put time on it. But they're just really starting to say, you know what, I think we can do something. And so I thought that back then, and now our church is starting to grow with those kind of folks. They say, well, I'm not a Christian. I didn't grow up in the church.
Right.
But the only people I can relate to is these Christians.
Right. Yeah, and which means somehow that you're reaching out and they're seeing you, and then they're saying, I want to be more like that, and not like crazy dude that I'm going to deal with.
Well, it's not I want to be like that. That's how I think. I mean, it's not the but yeah, it's not the religious aspect of it, right? Jesus is saying just common sense things,
Right.
Some of the things that they're teaching in our schools. I mean, I looked up some of the curriculum today that I couldn't show on here.
Right. Yeah.
I showed it to my wife and she got mad at me. Sure.
Yeah.
It was terrible. She goes, get that out of my face.
Well, and the thing I think that sometimes what happens is that a lot of people don't want to know what's happening around them. They would much rather put their head down because people are busy with their life, right? They're busy with, they're worried about their job, they're worried about their finances, they're worried about their kids, they're worried about the next family function, is the house going to be clean when my mother-in-law comes over, whatever the issue is. Most people,
Very important.
yeah, that's why most people are caught up in there. And that's perfectly normal, right? Everybody does that. And when they suddenly wake up and realize that, oh no, what's going on? What's happening around me? I always thought I lived in this society. And I call those road to Damascus moments for people, right?
Yeah.
And they happen to everyone at some point in time. And when those happen, if an outsider would look at it and say, well, where have you been for the last 20 years? It's going on forever. But it doesn't matter. To those people, that's the discovery point. And when they discover something's wrong, they need a place to go, or reasonable people to talk to find out how can I address this and how can I help it. And it's a shame that frequently they don't find that in the Church of Christians at all, and I think that's been the tragedy of the approach that at least mainstream sort of Christianity's had in America in the last probably 40 years. It's just this abandoning the community and the culture, whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, the Jesus movement that arguably, we just had the movie about that whole movement, it was really great. What they did that was fatal to me was they said, we can't be involved with the icky government. We're just going to sit here and spend the Bible. And that's not biblical. It's hiding your candle in the bush. It really is. So Jesus didn't just say, get in your little groups, stay home and read the Bible.
Right.
And plus, don't get me wrong, I believe in reading the Bible. But we need to take that and move into our culture and bring the love that we have not only against people,
Right.
The Matthew chapter 18, the golden rule is for everyone.
Right.
When I was a kid, most people lived by the golden rule. Right. We didn't lock our doors. We walked around. We were the kids that stayed out until the street lights came on.
Right.
That's how we knew how to go home. We rode the back of the truck and everybody was fine.
Right.
That's what he's telling us. But anyway, I want to, before we get done here, I want to talk about what's happening with our election. The election, we're in the middle of the election right now. Tell us about the, you said you had 800 cases open, or 80 are open right now. This is election integrity. And tell us about that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, the cases that I was referring to there were more the Public Disclosure Commission, which had to do with campaign finance violations, right?
Okay.
But we're really in two elections right now. We're in a local election, right? 2023 when we're recording this. A few races, you know, to quote big races, in 2024, many of those candidates are already running for office, right? They start early. And so you really got two elections going on. So the local elections, what's happening is a lot more people this year, I think, than we've had in the past, have woken up to what's the school board, for example. I think it's a good example where they've woken up to this school system has been plagued with problems, and for the first time we were aware that there's these problems are serious and real. And so there's a lot more people engaged and involved in that process, which inevitably means there will be better turnover. We're probably going to see a lot of new school board members get in there. And suddenly, wide-eyed, didn't discover what it's like to actually be on the school board, and I think that's important. It doesn't matter whether you're homeschool or your Christian school or your kids long gone. Somebody has to be in there to make sure that there's a functioning public school system that actually is not crazy and not corrupt, preferably. And so that's what's going on right now. I think a lot of people never get involved. And then when you have overlapping that, of course, is just the big race in 2024. The presidential races are always going to be what overshadows everything. In our state, you know, the concern is going to be who's the governor. We've got 4 statewide offices that are open, and so superintendent of construction, the attorney general's office, and for sure, and the public lands commissioner actually is 5 because there's also the it's the insurance commissioner position. So 4 positions, 1 positions, yet all of them have been and they're essentially up for grabs. What I find is that usually the Republican conservative side is completely unprepared, has no planning, and they're randomly trying to figure out what we're going to do next year to run good people there. And that's unfortunate. But you can't rely on somebody else to do it for you. So now's the time to get involved and start planning for that. Pay attention to what's going on in the local races. Now, when it comes to election process, the big concern has been, and anybody who's aware of this should be concerned about, what a mail-in voting system is, like what we have in Washington, right? And there's 2 approaches that people generally have to elections where they have concerns. They have concerns that the voter rolls are fluffed up and built with a lot of problems that allow bad actors to come in and manipulate. That's one. And there's a couple of different things related to that. And on the other side, the process is opaque and unclear, and the counting process, you can't tell what's going on, whether it's machines, whether it's people, whatever's going on here in these 2 areas. My focus has generally been more on the voter roll process, or the problems with voter rolls. And the reason for that is that it's been the dominant way that people have committed fraud and done bad things in elections. It's usually been manipulating voter rolls for the last couple of years. So they did it in New York City under Tammany Hall. They did it in Reconstruction South. When after the North kind of pulled out Reconstruction, they would conveniently remove all the freed slaves from the voter rolls and then fluff them up with a bunch of people who were real or people who died and keep up the voter rolls forever. It wasn't just Chicago or New York.
So this isn't new.
Nothing about that's new. And the reason why, and it's even relatively new, 2007, right? They arrested, or I should say they were caught and prosecuted Acorn in Seattle, falsifying voter records when they caught their guys using the Seattle Public Library and who knew it could be used for more than distributing meth, right? But they were using the Seattle Public Library to basically fill out fake voter registrations. And they had filled out 1,500, 2,000 voter registrations there. And the only reason they got caught was because they didn't pay the guy $10 an hour, right? They were too cheap and they ripped the guy off. And he was mad and he turned it in. Otherwise, they wouldn't even known that was happening. And they didn't do that just yesterday, right? They didn't just wake up one day and one person, you know, in an isolated incident decide, I'm just going to commit vote fraud today. They tried it in a mass industrial scale. That's something that legislators have been doing in the state for decades. And so the problem is nobody's willing to or wants to necessarily get into what's involved here. Over the years, the laws have changed to make that very difficult. And so a path to reform, I think, is important, is to start paying attention to voter rolls the same way that in the 1960s they started to do in the 70s. They started doing this in the southern states, and they start realizing that you have counties here that have 300% voter rolls compared to the population. Something's wrong. You know, I mean, your voting turnout is 102%, right? Something's wrong. So, you know, those are indications that something is problematically wrong there. Now, mail-in voting is particularly difficult because you've lost control of the ballot. You have no idea who fills it out. You have no idea. You know, there's all kinds of problems related to that. Fraud is real. It exists. It's always existed. The first fraud was from the first election. has been to reduce the transparency. Every move in the last 20 years has been to reduce transparency. And that's ultimately the path back, I think, to getting elections so they're better than they are now. The problem when you tell stories like that is that it encourages that. People will say, well, what's the point? Right? I don't want to put 5 minutes into filling out my ballot because I may not get the result so I'm just not going to do it. Right? That's an response. That's the wrong, nobody should be going apathetic because of the problem. What I have to do is still vote, get involved, be engaged, encourage more people, get them involved, and vote. It doesn't mean it's perfect, it doesn't mean everything's exactly the way it should be. It doesn't mean, you don't wait until everything's absolutely perfect before you do something. Right? Sometimes you go out and you mow the lawn and it's still, wetter than you want it to be. You still fix that roof on the rain. You still do things when it's not perfect. And elections are no different. You gotta keep being engaged and involved. And the number of people who stay home on the conservative freedom side of this equation, who vote like us, care about the same things we do, is enough to turn and change elections in almost every case. That is a large number of people. I've heard about people in Christian County before who I had conversations with, I've heard about thousands, but I've heard about people. I had conversations with them, we completely see eye to eye, and then I find out they've never voted.
Yeah.
And why? I've asked them, they said, well, I just don't, I think government's corrupt, or I think,
You're right.
Yeah,
That was you.
Exactly, and you helped it be that way.
Yeah.
And one of the things we say sometimes is make sure you vote so that somebody else can vote for you.
Yeah.
You bother to look and see if your ballot's been voted. So anyway, there's a lot more involved in it than that. But at least at a basic level, voting is the bare minimum, but it is hardly what I would call civic engagement. It's like the bare minimum of what you should do, just living your life, just like going to the speed limit or maybe dedication. But voting should just be something you do every time. But what we really need is more people involved civically engaged, where you're actually helping organize the people and addressing these issues. And it takes a very small percentage of the population to make a huge difference. Partially because by standing up and demonstrating you can do it, it's always more comfortable to follow than to lead. And so the more people that are out there leading on an issue that they think that matters to them, the school, the corruption in Thurston County's building department, how they distribute taxes. There's an audit going on right now in Thurston County, right? So we can pay attention to your law enforcement, right? Are they getting the best support that they have? Are they doing the right thing there? Your school district, are they stealing money? Right? I've caught a superintendent actually stealing money a couple years ago. And it surprised me, but the truth is the truth.
You caught.
I was involved with people, and I wrote stories about it. And personally, physically himself, stealing it. Now, actually, it's not a bad story because there's an element to it. It was a good example, right? There was something wrong with the school system, and it was mostly very public. I wrote about it, several articles about it. And when we dug into it, it turned out that the superintendent was stealing money 3 or 4 weeks from the school. He was actually giving himself special bonus checks that he could write for himself, unapproved by the school board, didn't even know. Right? He just wrote himself bonus checks, which would be nice. The second thing is he took the school credit card and used it for personal expenses. And the third thing he did is he took vacation and then charged the school for not taking vacation. So they paid for vacation. He still went to Las Vegas. This was discovered through public records requests, looking at his calendar and billing records, and went public with it. I was actually threatened with litigation when I was going to go public with it, but it was kind of back channel threat. Once I went public with it, about a month later, the guy went bankrupt. And what's interesting about that, and this is where there's this human element, right? The conspiracy of everybody's evil isn't always true. Sometimes it's just this mundane thing. You can see from his bankruptcy, the guy had really just been a gambler, and he really got into financial trouble, even though he made $300,000 a year. He had still put his family in significant financial hole, and probably the theft of money and the excuse and justification for it, right? The human capacity for justification is relentless. He was doing that, and the bigger story was really that the school district, the school board, didn't fire him sooner, and when they fired him, they gave him a bonus when he went out the door after catching his team. And that did change, and that resulted in turning over several school board members and improving things there moving forward. I only use that story because the guy wasn't evil. The guy probably just got into a lot of financial trouble and stress, pressured himself. People will make bad choices, and that happens. And they lash out to try to prevent the truth from coming out. And at the end, it turned out he just really had a serious problem to resolve. But things like this happen all the time. And why would they not? Right? They're angels that would be government. And because they aren't angels, We need to pay attention to them.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned when I was on the phone, I think a few days ago, was that it doesn't take a lot of people to get things going quite quickly. Things
Right.
can happen rather quickly.
Right.
Dial that out.
A lot of that is it takes very small groups of people to make a big impact on things. You don't need big organizations. You don't need a delivery of 1,000 people. You don't need rallies of 10,000 people in Capital, right, to make change. You just need good, capable people, small teams with affiliation. They don't have to formally organize. They just need to be there. And they pick something that's passionate to them that they care about. Since schools have been on a lot, that's a great example. Yeah. Focus your look. If that's what your passion is, focus your local school. Find other people who share your interests. And the power of working in a group, and I'm trying to be a lone ranger about the process, is that you need people to bounce ideas off of. And the skill sets are different than yours. That and you can, when you're too tired, they can keep doing some work, or when you're on vacation, they still pay attention more. And it just shifts the burden off of you and spreads it widely, a little bit wider. And small groups of people really make huge differences. And it's the biggest thing when you ever read emails written by government bureaucrats or something, they're worried about things. That terrifies them. A small group of dedicated people.
Can you give us an example of one that you've seen that has done?
Sure. I mean, in the 2016 election in Thurston County, right, every Democrat was bounced off the county commission. First time in state history. There actually wasn't any Republicans, there were Democrats. And that was a really small number of people that did that. The Republican Party at the time largely kind of thought it was hopeless.
So they were bounced off. What
Yeah, people got engaged, and there was a lot of education that went on in this county about, listen, money is people to spend, policies are crazy, the Democrat candidates are not good people, the documented history of really bad behavior. Who's going to actually be running the county, right? And it doesn't mean you selected the most perfect people in the world, but you certainly kept some of the worst ones off. And it was a real big shock because Thurston County did vote for Trump. It was 39% for Trump. And yet, it clearly showed that, at least as far as affiliation goes, that 25 to 30,000 voters in this county decided that they may vote for Hillary Clinton, but they sure as heck weren't going to vote for any Democrat on the county commission. And that indicates that that small group of people were involved. I was one of them, right? But did a good job communicating to their community about the problems locally that were involved. And it didn't have to have an R, and it didn't have to have a D next to the name. Now, in this case, the Democrat candidates were the bad team. But it was, you can make changes like that. And the same thing happened in the city of SeaTac, right? But a number of years, several times in a row, even though the other side House Amendment won, right? Citizens got together to organize small groups of people in the local council. That only happens if you get out and engage and have a rational approach to things. So you would reach out to people, talk to people you disagree with, you're not comfortable, and you may never see them in church. You gotta go talk to them.
Get out, get engaged,
Yeah.
have a rational approach.
Right.
Simple thing. Take the issue, fight issue, work with it, ask questions, and work through the problems. And then a small number of people can be very effective over time.
And share the truth. You will find the truth set you free, right?
Yeah.
Well, the truth sometimes is ugly. It is. When you uncover the truth about what's going on in local government, I'm afraid that it will not inspire you to think that everything's great. But you have to expose the truth so that the path to fixing the problem, or changing what's going on in your community, or doing whatever you have to do to get back on the right path is possible. Concealing it, hiding it, trying to pretend like it's not a problem makes it worse.
Well, I really appreciate you coming by. It was almost an hour, so that went by so fast. I can't believe it. You have so many good insights, and it's been really encouraging to hear your perspective on this. You've been effective in our community. It's a real pleasure for you to come by. And there was one more thing I wanted to get to before we go. Yeah, probably not one of those. Maybe another time.
Okay. Pastor, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. For
Yeah,
coming.
thank you.
All right. Very good.
Okay.